When I started writing Borderline, I did it because I thought it would be fun. I mean, like, what other reason is there to write fiction? At first I thought it was a great stress reliever, and I had a great time crafting my characters and turning my random plot idea into a full-blown story. I made the setting on the Mexico-America border and threw the topic of immigration in because I thought it was original, not because I really cared about the politics or any of that. But the more I researched and read about some of the things in my story, the more I realized that this is a much bigger issue than I ever would have imagined. I made my main character a nice human smuggler looking out for the welfare of other people, but I never realized how horrible the bad ones really were, and how common human trafficking really is. Human trafficking is different from slavery, and in many ways worse. While slavery is simply forced labor or servitude because of weakness, human trafficking is psychological as well as physical. The victims of this crime put their trust in the very people whom they are often running from in the first place. They turn to these people and offer up everything to them, desperate for freedom from whatever hell they lived in for their entire lives, just to move from one metaphorical prison to another. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." This statement perfectly reflects the victims of human trafficking, in my opinion. They believe that they will finally find freedom, but they are more enslaved by their false hope than they ever were before. Right now, there are at least 12.3 million enslaved human beings worldwide, though recent estimates say that the numbers may be closer to 21 million. Of those, 56% of forced labor victims are women and children. Just think, women and children being forced to work all day for no pay or anything. In addition to that, 12% of them are victims of continuous sexual servitude and abuse. There are over 100,000 enslaved children just within US borders, and that's not even including the adults. Reports of identified incidents of human trafficking show that the average age of sex slaves, both internationally and here in America, are 10 to 13-year-old children, both boys and girls. So you see, this isn't some obscure thing that doesn't have anything to do with you. This is happening here and now, and barely anyone seems to care enough to try and stop it. So if you're curious exactly how it works, let me explain a little bit about what human trafficking is. And just so you know, I'm getting this from cbp.gov, which is the official website of the US Customs and Border Protection. It's defined as when a person is induced by force, fraud, or coercion to 1. Work under the total or near total control of any other person or organization. 2. Forced to pay off a loan by working instead of paying money, often for an unclear period of time, and I'll talk more about that one later. 3. Forced, coerced, or underage prostitution. And the main forms of human trafficking are domestic servitude, sexual servitude, factory labor, agricultural labor, and forced soldiering. Human trafficking is quickly rising in popularity among criminals because of how easy it is. What normally happens, at least in the setting of my book, meaning the Mexico-American border, is that a person or family in poverty want to escape Mexico and try to rebuild their lives in America. They're so desperate to finally have a chance at happiness that they'll jump at the first opportunity to get away, making promises that they shouldn't make and selling things that they should keep. They cross the border expecting to find freedom, but instead they find themselves slaves to someone who they suddenly discover has complete control over them. Many human traffickers will find impoverished Mexican nationals and promise to take them across the border and give them a job in return for a favor or something along those lines. They keep their end of the deal, but the job ends up being forced labor, and the favor is that they keep doing that job for a long time, often for several years or even an entire lifetime. One of the reasons human trafficking is so cruel is because oftentimes the victim believes that slavery is the best option. Human traffickers deceive them into believing that their treatment is normal in America or that they deserve what's being done to them. They psychologically tear down their walls until nothing is left but a hollow shell of what they used to be. Stockholm syndrome often occurs, and the victim doesn't even consider the possibility of having another life away from the abuse. Another thing is that often the victim is financially dependent on their captor. They've already given up everything they ever had to come to the States, and they have no other means of survival than to keep working. The traffickers take advantage of their desperation and hope and manipulate it for their own financial gain. It's just sick to think about. When someone is a victim of human trafficking and manages to survive it, they are still held legally responsible for anything they've done while enslaved. Sex slaves are charged with prostitution, people forced to steal for their captors are charged with theft, and people forced to work as soldiers for criminal associations are charged with any crime that they commit. Now, I understand that at some point people have to pay for their sins, but seriously, have a little compassion. If children are told that they ever want to see their parents again, then they have to steal something or harm someone, what do you think they're going to do? Often they aren't even old enough to know the difference between right and wrong, and here these people are trying to push them to the point of desperation in which they'll do anything just to feel safe again. And yes, this really does happen. If that child gets caught, they will go to jail, and he or she really might not see his parents again, as they're either still enslaved or deported back to their country. Without legal documentation, they can't even be proved to be the child's legal parents, and they might lose him or her forever. Now, I'm not saying that the government doesn't care about victims of human trafficking. In fact, there are several agencies dedicated to the prosecution of human traffickers. If you want to know more about their efforts to stop human trafficking, Google FBI Innocence Lost Project, or click the link that I'll have in the description below. Reading and researching this has really opened my eyes to something rarely ever mentioned, yet terribly important. I hope that by writing this book or making this video, I can raise public awareness for these victims. If you could help spread the word as much as possible, I would be so grateful to you that I can't even express it in words. Now, on the off chance that you've been as impacted by these facts and statistics as much as I have, I urge you to make a donation today to stop human trafficking around the world. If you wish to make a donation, I'll have the link below in the description, which will lead you to a website devoted to both stopping human trafficking and helping surviving victims of it. Feel free to click on it and help them reach their goals. And as an extra thing, if you live in a border town anywhere in the United States, here are some things that indicate that someone is a current victim of human trafficking. If someone displays many of these signs and you feel that human trafficking is involved, call 1-866-347-2423 to report it. I'm copying this directly off of the border website. People may be victims of human trafficking if they 1. Lack identification documents or travel documents. 2. Live and work in the same place. 3. Lack freedom of movement. 4. Seem to be restricted from socializing, attending religious services, or contacting family. 5. Seem to have been deprived of basic life necessities such as food, water, sleep, or medical care. 6. Shows signs of having been abused or physically assaulted. Such signs range from the more obvious, such as broken bones, to the more subtle, such as branding or tattooing. 7. Seems submissive or fearful in the presence of others. 8. Seems not to control his or her schedule. 9. Seems to lack concrete short or long-term plans. 10. Seems to lack knowledge about the place where he or she lives. 11. Appears to date much older, abusive, or controlling men. Thank you for watching, and I hope I've opened your eyes to a rising issue in our country today.